So, animating pendulums. I wanted to do a couple of quick demos, a couple of different ways you can animate these things, and I think each one's useful depending on what your performance is supposed to accomplish. This is sort of that swimming critter thing that I did the other day in class. I wanted to demo it, but we ran out of time. So here you go. I have a 3 window setup up here. I kind of like this, especially when you're setting something up. We got a right orthogonal viewport over here. This is the hypergraph. If you're not familiar with it, it's great. It's as useful or more useful than the outliner. It's very visual, gives you the ability to look at nodes and what's connected to them. In our case, we're just using it for constructing our hierarchy. Down here is the graph editor. For this particular animation, we only need 25 frames. So I'm going to set the current amount of frames to 25 and the slider to 25. And what we have here is 2 parts. They're not attached to each other or anything yet. They're just there. One thing I want to make sure of first is that each one is zeroed out. So that's all zeroed out. This one has some scales and such on it. So what I'm going to do is I already have a history, center pivot, and freeze transforms shortcut on my custom shelf up there. But that zeroes everything out nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this out and make the rest of the tail. So I'm going to do a Control-D on this, and I'm going to slide this down to about there. Then I'm going to hold Shift-D and go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so now I got 8. If you look over here, there's our 8 nodes right there. Only variation I want to make on this, just to make it a little bit more visually interesting, is I want to grab every other one, and I have 2 surface shaders. So this way I get that set up and it's a little bit more interesting to look at. Okay, so we could create bones and basically snap bones to vertices for each section of the joint and then either parent or constrain the geometry to the joints. A couple of variations of things we could do. For simplicity's sake, parenting them will work just fine. So this is going to be the head, which is over there, and I want each successive joint to be in the hierarchy. So what we're going to need to do is middle click in the hypergraph here, and we can just visually construct our hierarchy. And it's great because you know you never missed anything, and you know that they're going to be perfectly the way you want them in here. So if I click off of that, we go there, we can see our hierarchy. If for any reason you did something wrong or screwed something up, it's easy enough. You could pull one off or pull several off and rebuild it. In this case, that worked just fine, so we just do that. So now whenever I grab the head of this thing, it grabs all its kids and moves them along just fine. So cleanup-wise, there's only one other thing I really want to do. It's not really necessary, but I think it's good practice. What we can do is we can grab all of the joints of the tail, and we're not going to be transforming it at all. All the transforms are going to be on the head here, and then all this is just going to be rotation. As a matter of fact, the rotation is only going to be on one axis. So what I'd suggest you do is you can grab all of these, the translations, and then right-click and come down here and go Lock and Hide Selected. Okay? So then, in theory, if you look at this now, we have no translations in here, which is great. It's one less channel to have to look at. Rotation-wise, if we look at this, let me switch to rotation, and we can see that we're really only going to be needing the X channel. All right, so I would also suggest you just grab everything again. That X channel is on top. We could just grab all of these channels underneath, and again come down here to where it says Lock and Hide. You can just hide if you want, but I suggest in this case Lock and Hide. All right. So the nice thing about that is your geometry is locked. Those channels are locked. You can't put keys on them accidentally or intentionally or anything else. This has now become a completely strictly 2D project. All right. You have all your channels on this, and you can do the same, but we're not going to be rotating this, so it's really not going to be an issue. But if you wanted to, you could clean that as well. Okay. So what we need is just kind of an up and down sinusoidal motion for the head to get that sort of up and down movement so that it looks like he's going like that, kind of swimming through water. Okay. So what I would suggest you do is let's set up the extremes first. So in this case, let's say we would take it up to one extreme, and that extreme might be a 6. So we would do that. We'll go to frame 1, and we can set this and just key that. Okay, and we're probably going to want that key to be exactly the same on the last frame, which is 25, so we'll key that selected as well. Then on frame 13, what we'll do is we can take this down to -6. And we can just as easily type that in. There's a couple ways we can get to it, but we'll take that to a -6, and again, we will key selected. Okay, so we look at this now, frame that up, and we get this sort of nice sinusoidal motion. For default, I'm not going to mess with it. You could expand the tangencies by using weighted curves up here, but that's fine. I think that'll work just great. Okay, what we're going to want to do is make sure in case we wanted to expand this animation beyond 25 frames, make sure our curves are set for pre and post infinity to cycle. And you're not seeing that, but the reason you're not seeing that is that post infinity is not turned on. And now it is. So we could open up this animation to 100 frames or whatever we want, and we would get that performance and it would continue on. Alrighty, so that's kind of cool. Next, so now we're looking at the animation of the actual tail. Let's start working on the sort of overlapping motion that we would expect. So as this object sort of moves down like this, boom, started moving down, you'd kind of expect the tail to start rotating back, or at least starting to rotate back. So what I'm going to do is just between these two keys, right here at the center point, let's rotate this back, say 10 degrees, something like this. And let me just even that off, make that an even 10 degrees. Actually, if we want, we can get crazy and make it an even 12 degrees. Okay? And what we'll do is we'll key this at 12 degrees. And as a matter of fact, we've got to go back to the beginning here. And on the extreme, we want that to be 0. Make sure I key that. At 13, which is that middle key, I also want that to be 0. At 19, which is going to be the halfway point, and since we're here, let's go to 25 and make that 0. 19 is going to be the halfway point, or the breakdown between the keys at 13 and 25. So why don't we take this at that point and rotate this down, and we will rotate this down a minus 12 degrees. Okay? So that gives us a basic rough. We could just clean this a little bit. In this case, your tangent should kind of run along the curve. That'll make that cleaner. And again, we probably want this curve to post-infinity cycle and pre-infinity cycle. Okay. If you look at your cycle right now, you can see it's not actually smooth. And the reason for that is that by default, Maya sets up these flat tangents, which work fine if you're not cycling, but in our case we are. And it gives us a weird sort of a stepped feedback. So what we're going to want to do is sort of rotate this one up. And again, what we'll do here is grab this and again do something like this. So these continue that nice smooth movement. And when we play that down, that should give us something like that. So what you see is you can see the tail starting to respond to the primary motion, kind of getting a little bit of secondary, but we only actually have a key or have an animation curve on that first joint. We don't have any animation on these, so it's a fairly limited effect at this point. Okay? So what we can do is we can actually grab this animation curve right here off of that one first object. We can select it. We can go Edit, Copy, and then grab all the rest of that tail. Make sure your time slider is on 1. Wherever you paste that animation curve is where it will occur, and it would be annoying if it was just some random key. And in our case, what we're going to do is we're just going to paste it. So now they all should be sharing the exact same animation curve. And if you remember in class when we looked at the 3 swinging pendulums, that should give you a very antenna-like movement. So you get this. But you're definitely feeling the secondary movement as if the tail is responding to the movement of the head. It doesn't feel particularly broken up. There's certainly no breaking of joints. All of the animation keys, if I can grab him for a second, are all stacked at this point. It's when we start to offset those keys that'll really start to loosen up. And if you remember again with the pendulums, depending on how much we open up the spacing between those curves is going to really kind of determine how loose the joints feel, or separate, or the breaking of joints, how separate that breaking of joints is going to feel. Okie dokie. So let's try that. Let's just grab all of the joints, but not the first one. And let's just grab these keys. All right, so there's a couple of different ways we can do that. Manually, we can just hit transform. I can hold down the shift key and go 1, 2. All right, so I can offset them all by that. I can then just deselect that, grab these, and manually select 1, 2, and do that. So they're offset by 2. Deselect that one, grab the curves again. 1, 2, okay. Deselect that one. Oops, sorry. Let's get all of these guys. Let's select all these keys again. The alternate way we were doing it was we were also doing it plus equal 2, and then that would move it down 2. So we could do it that way. And then grab all of these keys again. Right? So we can do plus equals 2. Right? Deselect this. Or go back to our original method, which is just hold down shift and go 1, 2. And grab these keys here and say 1, 2. Okay. So now, if we look at all these keys, we get this nicely separated, very even, almost echo-like effect on the animation. But it definitely gives you more follow-through. So if we look at it now, it gives you that sort of an effect. You can see where the keys are all the same. Where they're arriving, or when they're arriving at them, though, in space and time, is just a little bit different. Okay. Now that's okay. It's not a bad effect that you're looking at. I think it could be plussed. I think what we could do is grab a bit of the tail and accentuate the animation, or the amount that these keys rotate here. Not really necessarily change out the timing, although you could. You might take those last few and just maybe make them add another frame or 2 frames to the last 2 or 3 joints, and that would make them feel a little bit bushier, or a little bit lighter. In this case, all I'm going to do is grab these 4 last segments, and we'll just grab the keys there, and I'm going to hit scale, and I'm going to hold down shift again and middle mouse click. All right, and then just bring these up. So bringing these up, let's say like 0.3. Okay, and then I'm going to just turn that one off. This leaves me then with the last 3. Grab these guys. And again, I'm going to click in the middle, because where you click when you scale these keys matters. If I click from here, they'll all scale using this as the center point, same as if I did it on the bottom. If I do it in the middle, they'll scale equally in both directions. So holding down shift and middle clicking, I want to go vertical this way like that. And on the bottom of the screen there, you can see where it's giving me a readout of exactly how much animation I'm actually scaling this by. So I can take this up to 1.3 as well. Shut this off, kind of come out a little bit. Grab this and do something like that. If you look in the window, you can actually see how much more it's actually rotating. So I might even rotate these last ones a little bit more. Something like 138. Select this one, grab this, and scale this. So something like 1, 3, or maybe even 1, 4, something like that. So now when I grab all these keys, you can see that we're getting this, and that last one's a little bit high, but we'll see how bad it looks. But it definitely gives you more rotation effect on the back end. And that's going to give you the effect of a much lighter tail. So let's take a look at that. There you go. It's kind of nice, actually. I don't mind that. It's kind of underwatery. I don't think that's very squirrel-like. I'd probably have dialed that back a bit. Matter of fact, maybe we will dial that back a little bit. Let's just grab that last one. Just do this. Just take that back down just a little bit. Something like, I don't know, like that. So then we can actually see, yeah, I think that works better. Something like that. Like turn this off, this off, this off. We've got these two here, and just scale it back down just a little bit so it's not quite such a dramatic effect. So we grab that now, something like that. So let's just hit the button on that. Yeah, that's not bad. I like that. So, as far as animating out something, and let's just put this into perspective view so we can take a peek at them at it, kind of heading this way. You definitely get that secondary movement on the tail, that a swimming eel sort of a thing. And this could be done very sideways. If we were doing something kind of very sideways, you might do something of like a very eel-like character. And we just would use a different, or a snake sort of a movement. We could have done something completely different. We could have had this head on a path and did something with the tail very interesting. In that case, you probably put the whole thing on a path. But if you wanted to get a very separate sort of a kind of a swimming motion on the tail. But that's basically how you go about it. And I think that that gives you the ability to really control your animation and get a really nice performance. But hopefully that made sense. And look for a couple more techniques maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. All right? Thanks much, guys.